they get the chance. They were born in bloody circumstance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. A voice from the underground, given room to breathe, not puppy drowned. So die if you get the chance. Better men than you've been, let this dance. To go, leave me, run like you've never run before. I have seen the worst, and there is nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me away. To go, leave me, run like you never did. No, believe me, run like you've never run before.
Oh no, it's happened again. This is what happens at the end of term, doesn't it? Everything goes wrong.
Right,
Oh,
you got it?
someone's playing silly.
Yay.
Is that you messing around with it, John Anderson? There
I
we
was
go.
trying to, like, obviously you were incompetent, and I was just trying to correct
That's
the mistake.
karma for you making fun of me last time.
That's because well, you missed the first 2 seconds of the theme tune last week, John. That's the best bit.
It's true. It's true.
Anyway, hello everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy Black. End of term fee.
I think it is just me that I thought I was totally just.
my
just
mic-
went completely-
I moved my leg slightly, my microphone went off.
See, I just was putting puzzled faces and going, Cammy, I was trying to lip read, and it looked like what you were saying was, we've got some of the best guests on the podcast tonight, but not really our favourite guests, just a few like kind of interlopers.
Yes, so obviously we've got me and Craig, and then John and Johnny here under duress because they didn't want to talk about the Glasgow Toulon game. That's what I was saying. I was accusing Johnny McGinty of driving another bus into his broadband exchange in his village just to get out of this.
I think you might have.
I think he has. I think he's
He's for a long time.
I didn't. I was trying to tell if Johnny's broadband had frozen or whether he was just absolutely furious. Not having to spend 60 minutes talking about the Glasgow Toulon final.
I couldn't work out whether it was yours or mine, but I guess it must be mine. It seems
Yeah.
to be a little bit better now, touchwood.
Well, I'm
We'll
certainly
let's
not
start
talking
with the Glasgow
referees
game, and then
today.
we'll see. It might break again.
He's practicing the Drax the Destroyer approach to podcasting, where if he stays still, so still, no one can see him.
No one can see me. Anyway, hello everybody. So this week, what we are going to do, this is the last. At some point, we have to have a break on this podcast. We're pretty. Some would say relentless. Some would say regular. Others would say consistent. Not many. However, we
Sounds
are.
a bit like my bowel movements, is it?
That's exactly what I was thinking as well.
Relentless, regular, and consistent, Craig. That's not bad for our age, though.
I've roomed with Craig, and I can confirm all of those.
Anyway, so what we thought we'd do this week is we're going to do a season roundup, and we'll go through the various facets of Scottish rugby and do a wee season roundup of how things have gone. Next week we'll have a proper break. Then what will likely happen is throughout June and July we'll have some Patreon content. I may even do a create your own adventure 2023 World Cup edition for those of you who enjoyed that last time. The 20 what we want? Yeah, the 2019 edition is still up, and I'll post a link afterwards if anyone wants to navigate cultural protocols of Japan as Gregor Towns says cultural attaché and see if you can get Scotland to win the World Cup. That's
I was
still
so
there.
bad at that one. So bad.
Did you ever get to the end screen, Johnny?
No, I don't think I have yet. I might need to go and have another go. I've not done it for a while.
Yeah. So we'll be doing that. We at some point we'll just have some Patreon nonsense as we head into the World Cup warm-ups over the summer, and then straight into the World Cup. At some point there'll be the URC. Then we've got the WXVs as well to talk about. So lots of rugby coming up. So we'll have a break next week, and then we'll launch. We'll ease everybody into it through the Patreons and then through our proper podcast. If you want to be a Patreon, you can sign up at patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast if you want to carry on listening to the podcast throughout June and the start of July. Joining me this evening, and I haven't done the introductions yet, although you've heard some of the voices of those joining me this evening. We've got John Anderson. Hello, John.
Good evening, all. Good evening, Cammy.
Craig Manson. Hello, Craig.
Good evening, all. How we doing?
We've got Lisa Martin. Hello, Lisa. Oh, Lisa's she's literally just joined us and she's frozen. She's done a Johnny. And we've got Johnny McGinty as well. Hello, Johnny.
Hello, how are we doing? I came up with the idea for a Patreon, by the way. I don't want to collide your worlds too much, but I heard a good fan theory this morning that the reason that Bandit and Chili Healer have got such a nice house is that they're running an international smuggling ring in ancient artifacts.
Yeah, there is a theory because she does. Do
She's
we want to get
airport
this? No, it's
security.
this
No,
Patreon.
let's wait.
Let's get this. Is this your way of delaying talk? So yeah, because he's an archaeologist.
Yeah,
and she
she's
works airport security. I mean, it scans.
Yeah, we can maybe dive into it a little bit.
We might do.
Sometime next month.
If there's demand, if you please let us know on the Patreon if you would like me and Johnny to spend an entire Patreon episode dedicated to Bluey, and we have people who would thoroughly enjoy joining in with that. We will do that. We will spend an entire episode of a Patreon podcast getting deep into Bluey.
We could, in fact, there's the State of Origin episode. We can deep dive.
Oh, there is, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that our way in? Do we
tangentially
just analyze? Let's talk about the State of Origin episode of Bluey as our way in of just spending an entire 2 hours of a Patreon podcast talking about how great Bluey is.
That'll either be our most popular or least popular episode, and it could go either way.
Here's an idea for you. Why don't you just set up a separate podcast and you could do an episode per episode breakdown, and then you could keep us out of it.
Don't you
Craig,
threaten me with a good time, Craig Manson.
listen. There is a massive the Venn diagram of Bluey fans and people who listen to this podcast is almost a perfect circle. That's the feedback we get on Twitter. Johnny and I have recommended this program to grown adults with no children, and they have watched it, and their feedback is very positive that it is the best thing on television right now.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
It's
okay. I'll maybe consider it.
Yeah, I mean, it's got everything. You'll laugh, you'll cry. It's honestly, forget Succession.
It's
Right.
fantastic. Yeah.
Well, I cry as much as I cried at Ted Lasso last night.
Don't, no spoilers. I haven't watched it yet.
No, I've not seen it yet either. I've not seen the last
No
episode.
spoilers.
All I said was I cried.
Very dare you, man?
How many times I did?
Bombshell in there.
How many? I'm interested to know how many times I've got a running kind of. It's not a contest as such, but me and Lee Calvert do have a running thing about how many times we've cried at the latest episode of Ted Lasso. I did 3 in the episode before this week. Oh, that's a high quarter.
That was a high quarter.
Yeah.
Also not great for an audio podcast, but
I was trying to be I wasn't trying to spoil anything, you see. I was just trying to have keeping this in joke going.
Does they spoil anything, mate?
Anyway,
That's a bit-
speaking of crying, which season are we going to review first, Edinburgh's or Glasgow's?
Oh, if you get Edinburgh,
See what I did there?
Edinburgh's out the way quite quickly, you know. It's
We could do, because I feel like then that way, John. What we'll do then is that then Johnny and John will have to watch themselves. Otherwise, then you can unleash when we come around to Glasgow. So let's do Edinburgh first, then Craig.
Luckily,
As
Lisa's come back now, so she can discuss Edinburgh now as well. So it's not
She
just
can. So
it's not just me that has to take the shit.
what we'll do, we'll do Craig and Lisa. Let's
End the
talk about
term, Craig.
Edinburgh.
11
End
minutes
the
and
term,
33 seconds.
It's an end of term. Sorry, man.
It's fine. So Craig, Edinburgh season. It's I think it's fair to say it's a mixed bag, and you're ending it without a head coach.
Yeah. Sounds a bit like Glasgow's last year, isn't it? Really? Although we attacked a little bit better. No, John, I'm sure, has got all the quotes written down from the beginning of the season because he likes to.
You were winning the league, Craig. I remember.
Mr. Manson, you said this on such and such a date, did you not? It was so much hope and promise, and unfortunately, a lack of, from what I can tell, the whole we'll score more tries than you score method of winning games didn't get there, unfortunately. So it was a difficult one, especially for Edinburgh fans who really quite got excited about what was going on last season. But all it takes is a couple of scores to go our way. The first 4 games, I think we won 1 and then lost 3. But the ones we lost were by a point, by 2 points, and we still got try bonus points on most of them as well. So those games, you win them, and all of a sudden your season's looking different. So it's okay, fair enough. What could have happened, what we could have won, but no, it's been a difficult year, a very difficult year.
Lisa, I mean, what one positive that actually came out of a bit of a negative is that Edinburgh have got Doohan back, and they've gone back for on a. I mean, it's hard to tell these days because we don't get told how long people have signed for, but it was kind of an initial short-term deal and then a longer-term deal, and that's got to be a bonus for Edinburgh. They have managed to now, although they've got him back rather than retained him, they've retained some of the bigger names. So Darcy's still around. You've got Doohan around. They've got a bit more of a settled squad around them.
Yeah, I think it's great to have these big names there, and the pedigree they bring from internationals and obviously from club. Obviously, when Doohan was down at Worcester as well, but you also then having a lot of pressure on them of we know how well you can perform, so you need to start doing it. I think having so much of an emphasis on these guys and then having Darcy unavailable for a large period of time didn't massively help us. And then Doohan for, again, periods of the time, didn't look like he got off the bus. We're expecting a lot of these guys to, to get us go forward, to get us points on the board. And, we are attacking well. It's just that our finishing ability needs to be a bit more clinical. And, like you said, these big names that we've retained, that we've got, for the next 1 to 2 years, we really need to have these guys start showing why we retained them in the first place and why we've given them these 2 years extensions.
John, say something nice about Edinburgh.
Do you know, I was going to say something nice about them anyway. I think Edinburgh have or had all the ingredients, and I think the problem here is not that. So Edinburgh have had a poor season, and I think they've been hampered by a number of different things. That difficult second season that you often find with new inexperienced head coaches, and I think there's elements of Edinburgh that have been found out in that aspect, but I think they've also got a slightly aging squad at key positions, which hasn't helped. But ultimately, Edinburgh have all the tools at their disposal to be a very, very good side. I think the problem last season was the expectation was so high. After, let's be clear, a 7th place finish, right? You don't finish 7th and then go win the title. That's not really the progression path we see with the clubs we've got in the league now. So I think Edinburgh have suffered a wee bit from second season syndrome, but I reckon next year they'll bounce back from that under whatever head coach. If they pick the right head coach, they'll bounce back from that. They've got the players to do that. They've got a lot of young talent coming through as well now, starting to challenge in those kind of aging positions. I'm concerned about a couple of the people you've let go. I think you've let go some quite good talent. Recruitment's going to be key for you, but yeah, Edinburgh are not as bad a team as they showed this season, and they weren't a million miles off it. Is that positive? Can I go with that?
I think that's all right. I'll allow it, Johnny. I know we make. I know you in particular. Pick up on Edinburgh in the stadium. It's like Adobe's Garden Centre. I know we've made that joke before on the podcast. However, there is a sense that Edinburgh feels much more of a club than it ever has done before, and that's got to be helping. It's not, they're not playing games in the kind of vast emptiness of Murrayfield, and there is a bit more of a push from social media to kind of create much more of a club atmosphere, and it feels less forced than it has done in the past. It feels more natural. The players certainly seem more connected with the fans than they have done in the past. Then it's not just a kind of, although arguably perhaps a couple of players maybe did feel it was a little bit like a kind of stepping stone to the Scotland squad. But generally the players seem to want to play for Edinburgh and want to win, and that's got to be progress for the club.
Yeah, definitely, and it's a whole club thing as well. And in fact, it's even outside of just Edinburgh. It's like, as much as we like to make fun of the look of it and whatever, it's a great facility, and it's the perfect sort of size and atmosphere of stadium for the URC. At the moment, it's also the perfect size and atmosphere for the women's team, and it's been great to have them playing out of the dam. Hopefully, they'll outgrow it in a year or two. But for the moment, it's really, really good. It's a good place to go to games. The atmosphere's fun. Edinburgh do a lot of stuff to help that get better as well, with like club night and fan appreciation night and stuff. They have kind of upped the ante this season in terms of what they're doing to connect fans to the club, and it has made for a much better sort of club atmosphere, I think, than they've had in the past.
Craig, how does that feel being in the stadium now? I mean, obviously you'll have seen a marked difference. So has that kind of been sustained over the last couple of seasons with the now the stadium's kind of more, I suppose things are more settled? I know we all kind of joked about the fact that players were going to have to pad across the car park to get from the change dressing rooms into the stadium, but they've actually, if anything, they've made a bit of a feature of that in actually entering the stadium and the way that works sometimes after games. Does it feel more of a home?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I think, for example, we, I and me and the family stand in the Lothian stand, and we're in the terrace part rather than the seats. And the Lothian stand has already become a place known for the noise and known for a mixture of heart and celebration. And I think the other stands are starting to. I definitely think the Murrayfield stand has become quite noisy and quite a good place to be. The Riverside stand, or whatever they call it, I've forgotten what they call it, but that seems to be the one that doesn't tend to sell very much of. That tends to be the one that visiting fans tend to get tickets from. But I definitely think it's a as you say, it's a massive step forward. And for the last 2 years, it's been a pleasure to go to. Even though, even if we are getting beaten, there's still a great atmosphere within. Even whether you're pulling the team apart or the referee apart, or whether you're celebrating together, there's a very, very good vibe within the stands. And just as you say, that Edinburgh have really the marketing team or whomever's in charge of it, the match day team have really made a feature of the where the players walk across from Murrayfield, and it's almost become part of a small village of all your food and your drinks are all down there, and so while you're having your pre-match burger or whatever, the players are coming past you to go into the stand to warm up, and it really adds to the atmosphere.
Lisa, how much of a difference does it make to kind of players, do you think, having the fans that close to the pitch? I think we've kind of touched on this briefly before, but obviously at big Murrayfield, there's quite a gap, and at other stadiums traditionally there is that kind of either a track or there's this distance, but the fans really are right on top of the players, and that's got to be intimidating to opposition teams coming to Edinburgh, especially with a bit more vocalism from the fans and Edinburgh fans these days.
Yeah, I think it makes a massive difference having the fans so close, and that they have that ability to be intimidating. Obviously, it's great when you're playing well; they can get on your back and they can really motivate you. Obviously, it's a bit more challenging when maybe things aren't going so well. But I think having it feel tighter and having it feel more enclosed creates more of that community vibe and that more of a togetherness thing. So it's actually, here we do have a whole venue behind us, and you can look and you can see everyone in the crowd, and whether that be friends, family as well. I know that when I was playing, if it was a bit of a tough moment or whatever, if you could spot someone in the crowd you noticed, it just gave that little bit of extra lift of okay, they're here watching, okay, maybe we need to buck up my ideas here and pull my socks off and get on with this. But I think having stands that close to the ground, that close to the action, not only helps the product itself, because young kids can actually see what the hell's happening, but also it just creates a fantastic atmosphere and environment you want to be part of.
Yeah, Craig, go give me a highlight of the season then for as an Edinburgh fan.
For me, and it's going to be the tried and true. Well, apart from it's the beating Saracens meant a lot. It was something that was at home. They, apart from not having Farrell, they brought up a fairly decent squad to play against us, and we quite enjoyed that. I did see that, Lisa, and I had to mention it. So, but and also, during that game, seeing VP Nell after he came on. Immediately got a scrum penalty and just stood up and smiled, kicked out the power belly and went and just smiled, and I think it was that game. But anyway, it was, he has been a superstar for us, and still continues on for the next year. So yeah, I think that has to be one of my highlights.
And Lisa, highlight for you of Edinburgh this season?
I don't really know if I can pick one, to be honest. I think again, it probably does kind of tail around the Saracens games and just the way that they're able to get themselves up for such a big occasion. I think that for me, I'm maybe being completely unbiased, total on the fencer for those days. I think really showcase that we have the ability to compete with one of Europe's best. So I think basically saying exactly what Craig said for once. Saracens games are great.
Lovely. So that's a neat roundup for Edinburgh. We talked last week, I think, about kind of hopes for next season, and we'll touch on that. We'll touch on that as we get into kind of season previews, and we find out who's actually going to be the Edinburgh coach going forward. It'll be exciting when that finally gets announced that Steve Diamond's got the job. John, let's turn to Glasgow now.
When Steve Diamond gets announced, I'm doing a Patreon special, 3 hours, and I'm just going to sit. I'm going to invite everyone and their dog on. It's going to be beautiful.
You
Well,
imagine-
I can categorically say he will not be guessing it. I was not getting it.
We've
That-
got,
that's
we've got,
okay.
we
That
have got the
sounds like-
ability to, we've got the ability to play sound clips back on this podcast. Lisa.
Which is why we've
I'm
got this one.
quietly
Craig saying they were
confident.
going to win the league.
quietly confident that yeah, he'll be gone come November.
Yeah,
Sounds like
well-
someone in the know. That sounds
Well,
good.
I'm just a bit disappointed I won't get to spend the entire of next season doing my terrible Steve Diamond impression.
Oh well, Johnny beat you with his terrible Leo Cullen impression last week.
I'll get another chance to crack that out this week as well.
Of all the people you can impersonate, Johnny, come on, mate.
Let's be perfectly clear. I think we learned last week that Leo Cullen is not a person I can impersonate.
I was going to say it wasn't an impersonation. Let's just be clear of that. Yeah.
Attempt, okay? Attempt.
Can
Sorry,
I, just
Cammy.
while we're on it, just because while we're on Edinburgh, can I just say on the URC site, the two positives we have is we were first in our stats. We were first in scrums.
What do you mean? You were the first ones to bend up? What does that mean? You're
Yeah, what does
we
that
are-
scrum mean?
Bend
You mean you
over.
had the most scrums, you won the
We
most
had
scrums.
we had the most scrum wins,
Okay,
Okay.
that's fine.
and
When you said, I thought you were
second.
just first to most scrums. I was going to say that's not
Yeah.
that's not like something you should be celebrating.
Well,
I
actually,
know-
you know what? With WPNL being first to most scrums is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
True.
And we were second. Our stats for kicking were second in the league as well. Would you believe?
What, as in you
What,
kicked
si-
second most?
kicking-
Yeah,
Success?
Again, we're going to need a bit more context.
Kicking success second in the league.
What, as in kicking
Kick
at
and goal
goal?
success.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot to kicking, Craig. I know it doesn't seem like it to you, but there's lots of different kinds of kicking.
I'll tell you
and
what.
lots of different ways you
What
can
I'll
do it.
say. What I'll
So
say.
you can't
is
just
what
go, "Oh, we were second at kicking."
We were
That's
good
a
at
lot more
kicking.
context.
Prop life.
I can say exactly what I want to say on here. That's what I've decided. Nobody is putting any sort of don't tread on me on this podcast. As far as I'm concerned, go
Look,
to the URC website, look up Edinburgh, and you will see, and you can make your own decisions because that's all I got.
As a wise man once said, Craig, you can prove anything with facts.
Absolutely. And John Anderson can prove anything with stats. He almost proved that Danny Wilson was a good coach with stats, but that's a different story.
I think you'll find I absolutely didn't. prove that.
So I was like the touch paper there. I was just to see what you can say.
So,
Cammy,
John,
let's go.
have you got a note of what you said in the early part of the season on this podcast when
Yes.
Glasgow appointed Franco Smith?
So I actually listened back to the episode after the Benetton game, when Glasgow, an undercooked Glasgow, got absolutely shellacked by Benetton, and I said disjointed, disappointing, will ultimately end up 11th. I was confident that things were going to improve. I did, however, say they looked like a team that are underprepared, and I think judge them in a couple of weeks' time. However, we shouldn't fear Benetton because they are a pointless team, and actually we're much better than them. Despite,
I wish you would stop saying that about Benetton. Like that was true about Benetton 5 years ago,
Well,
but
it's
it's very
still
much
true. We are
not
a better
true
team
now.
than them.
And you say it every
We're-
year, and every
Where are
year at
Benetton
least
in the
one
playoffs?
Scottish team gets beat by them.
Where are Benetton in the playoffs? Where are they in European finals? They're nowhere. So we're fine.
But they beat Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Ulster and
At
the
home.
Bulls this year.
At home.
They're not like a joke team anymore.
Nah. Where did they
You look at
finish?
the signings they're making as well, and clearly if
Yeah,
they were a
Fekir
joke
Tour's
team,
got
who
a place for them.
would go? Yeah, who would go to a joke team?
I mean, somebody who's after big dollar, who
By-
really doesn't take their
by the
their
start of
work
next
very
season,
You
seriously.
ain't
John,
gonna
we're gonna
find that,
convince
Ellie.
We're going to convince you to stop calling Benetton a joke team by the start of
Nah,
next season.
not happening. Not
Because
happening.
it's in the pantheon of wrong opinions, it might be your wrongest opinion.
Just to please David of the Scrum of the Earth podcast, John, you just sit there in your wrongness and be wrong. Okay.
Yes, I wasn't terribly confident at the start of the season, Cammy.
No, Johnny, how were you? I mean, on reflection, is this first year kind of blip? Do you think, or do you think kind of Franco Smith's the real deal and is kind of here to stay?
I think he'll be around for a while. I think he seems to have created an atmosphere that the players are enjoying being around, but is also kind of created a bit of accountability. He handles being in front of the press really well in terms of the way he analyzes victories and defeats straight after they happen in a way that kind of, I think, keeps the players happy, the press happy, and the fans happy. And he's put in some really fantastic game plans. Like, I think he could be an absolutely great signing. For all that, when he was announced, we all went, really? He's turned out to be a bit of a revelation.
So, Craig, I'm going to put this to you. Say something nice about Glasgow.
Glasgow have confounded every expectation and every person's point of view, unless they were dyed in the wool Glasgow. And they have done an incredibly good job with, and I said this last week, and okay, there are some British Irish Lions in there. There's some fantastic players in there, but what I would say is as a squad that isn't all bells and whistles. They have got bells and whistles, don't get me wrong. They have proven that, but if you looked at them at the beginning of the year, they were in a transition stage. There were still players and there are still players that have just been re-signed that I wouldn't think should be still playing. But there's some young players coming through. There's some players that you didn't expect that were signed that you didn't expect to get anything out of, and they've completely confounded everybody and said, "Well, no, here I am. Look at me." So I think they've done I think whether it's Franco Smith or whether it's the players themselves or whether it's the leadership within the club, they've done a fantastic job this year. We're almost at this situation that Edinburgh had last year. So now the second album, the tricky second album, is going to be the interesting one, and the promise that is there, as we've. If you look, as we talked about with the final, etc., I'm sure we'll talk about the final fairly soon. But the issue you have is that Glasgow were knocking on the door of the Pro 12 for 3 or 4 years before they actually won it. So what they now need to do is take what they have and move forward and be back into the finals next year. So I don't see them doing very much with the European Cup. But I think the URC, they've got a good chance of getting back to the finals again next year.
And Lisa, I mean, for Glasgow, they've been fairly unlucky in a way with fly halves, because Ross Thompson was the guy that was going to steer them through, but he's been hit by injury. Duncan Weir was, bizarrely kind of brought back into the mix, and then he's been somewhere between Stirling and Glasgow. But then, what a find Tom Jordan has been, who's kind of come from the Super Six, and in a way, Glasgow have been quite lucky in a way, I suppose, that someone of that quality has kind of been able to make that step up.
Yeah, I think so. I think the way that Tom Jordan plays is very much the way that Franco likes to play. He likes a 10 that has a running game. And I think he's just kind of grown week on week in that jersey. I think obviously there's still going to be questions over kicking game, but there's always questions over kicking game for every single 10 in the world. But I think it's great to see that, the Super Six has got some little diamonds in there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to see Richie Simpson's going to be getting in and around as well. He absolutely tore it up in 20s. And again, coming from utter obscurity as well. He was playing for Club Air Team, didn't get an academy, wasn't involved in anything really, and all of a sudden he's kind of completely flourished. So I think there's a lot of youngsters coming in, and to go into an environment where Franco is heading up, where he's creating a team culture and a team values of the fact being hard work, and being hard working is a non-negotiable. If you want to be successful in Thursday, you need to be working hard. So I think, Tom Jordan's been an absolute find, and I hope that they look to build a team around him. And I mean, it's going to be really hard for Ross Thompson to get back in again, but that's a challenge he needs to have in order for him to keep the elf in his game and really push, looking forward, pushing into making a Scotland jersey his as well.
Shall we talk about the final then, John? I know you don't want to.
Do we not get to do our highlights? Edinburgh
I'm
gets
going
a
to come
highlight,
around. I'm
we
going
get
to
a
come.
highlight?
They get. I'll come around. I'm coming to that first. I'll
We've
come
got
to that.
final
Don't
to
worry.
talk about,
Well,
Johnny.
let's be honest. Our highlight's not going to be the final, is it?
No,
That's
but
probably
let's talk about the final because we said last week, and John, you weren't here, so I'll give you a chance first. We said last week that this was an opportunity for Glasgow to be in a final to show they could cope with the pressure, and it didn't happen. And that's got to be a worry, I suppose, going forward. Is it's all well and good having a season where you build, you get close in the RC, and it was a close game against Munster. The result was certainly close, but then to get to a final, you'd hope they'd learn from something like that. But at the same time, it wasn't anywhere close.
Yeah, no, I mean that's absolutely fair. They were miles off it, and miles off what they have produced this season. And I would probably take the whole, almost the business end of the season, the whole playoff rugby, the whole knockout rugby part of the season hasn't necessarily been that great for Glasgow. I think what I keep coming back to is I think it's a year too early. I think almost the development of these players, I think they'll benefit from this. I think we'll talk about some of the people who maybe will not benefit from this because they've done this over and over. And if you are consistently repeating failure, are you necessarily going to ever change your ways? Probably not. Some of these young players in particular will learn so much from that experience. They got stage fright, and they done it against Munster as well. Munster, it was a close game, but that was because Munster were a bit rubbish. Munster could have and probably should have blown that Glasgow performance off the park that night. Glasgow didn't turn up for knockout rugby this year, and for me, that it is a season too early. That was never. I think with the best will in the world, I don't think you realistically would have heard Franco Smith talking about Challenge Cup finals and URC knockout stages this season with where that squad was. Again, look back to that Benetton game in the first game of the season. The squad was a shambles. We've got Tom Jordan, who, as you guys rightly said, obviously missing for the final, but has been a standout player for Glasgow this year. He's not even a 10. He's a 12. And, the reason probably Sam Johnson's been released is that Tom Jordan has that potential to cover 12 when necessary. He's obviously proven he can play 10 this year. It's been a really strange season, but we've been building something really amazing and then came to knockout rugby, and it is just a step too far for this group at this point in time. But, we're... Sorry, Johnny. I've just seen your message in the background. Who has got a budgie? Who's got the budgie? Own up.
It's not a budgie. I've got my window's open and and the birds are tweeting outside. That's all it is.
Well, that's because we're talking about Glasgow, Craig, obviously. So they're
Yeah, well, see, I'm
happy.
about to disagree with you wholeheartedly at the moment, so it's fine.
Excellent. I think it's a season too early, and I think Glasgow have had a very, very good season against any expectation. I think it'll be interesting to see how that progresses. I think there's a lot of winners in that team. I think there's a lot of dead wood that can still be cut in that team, and I think Franco will do his best to do that in due course.
Johnny, John talked about Deadwood there, and there have been a lot of, in some ways, surprising cuts to the Glasgow squad. And obviously, Franco Smith's got his own view of how that should be and wants to put his own stamp on it. I think everyone was surprised by Sam Johnson, but maybe not Ryan Wilson, although you got the impression he wasn't quite ready to go.
Yeah, and it was a weird one because the proper official Glasgow Instagram shared his story of him having a beer and a sing-song with the boys in the changing room after his last game, and his caption was like, "Oh, you never know when it's going to be the last time, so make sure you really enjoy it." And to be honest, with everything up until that, I thought it was sort of a mutual thing. Like Wilson is realistically, for everything that he's done for the club, is not in a match day 23 at the moment, barring some fairly serious things happening. So it made sense as a move, and I kind of thought everyone was on board with it. But then that Instagram post came out, and it made me my head turn a little bit because it did kind of suggest that maybe it wasn't entirely mutual that he was moving on. It was a bit of a weird one.
But to a certain extent, Craig, I think that Glasgow needed to maybe get rid of some of the bigger personalities in a way. You know, it's obviously it's always good as a club to kind of have people that know the history and kind of embody what the club means. But at some point, they have to move on to make way for new blood, but also, I suppose, new perspectives, new outlooks from a squad point of view, a new approach, less banter.
Yeah, less fiction, less banter, less. Yeah, I can't say the word until I'm into Patreon. So I think for me, it's one of those situations where we all kind of discussed, you know, when he first came on board. One of the points I did make is that if you know, especially the Tom Jordan situation, Franco Smith did exactly the same thing at Benetton, where he brought in he brought in Garbisi at 19, and this young man transformed and is now the leading 10 for Italy. So, and he is a very good player. Ended up going away from Benetton. Where's he gone? Is he away to one of the French teams? Montpellier. So, well, mind you, they're not doing very well this year, but he's a very, very good player. So that's the sort of, you know, it's a natural thing to do. If you take over as a manager in any job, you tend to clear out the big names to bring in your own team, and I think that's what he's done. Sam Johnson, well, it surprised me, but it didn't surprise me because he's not played very often this year. So it kind of, you expect the same with Cole Forbes and people like that. You know, they haven't played very often, and those were players that Glasgow fans were saying, oh, you know, they're dyed in the wool Glasgow, they're going to do a great job. Cole Forbes especially came out to be, you know, everyone said that he's going to be the second coming, and all of a sudden he just didn't seem to work very well for Glasgow, unfortunately. I think also what you have to look at,
the feral cats of Glasgow can breathe a sigh of relief.
Yeah, definitely. He just all Cole Forbes really needed was Dave Rennie to take him around his house and play the guitar and put his arm around him, and that would have been helpful. But
who said Cole Forbes was the second coming? By the way, just
when his first game, apart from his, was it no yellow or was it a red?
We said his defence was good. He looked solid. But
he looked fantastic. I'm sure.
I think Cole Forbes came here thinking he was going to walk into a Scotland jersey as well, and when he discovered it was much tougher than he thought, he kind of decided he was going home again.
I think he's doing this. He's done the same thing, and this, I'm going to say this, and I don't mean it in a bad way because I think he's a phenomenal player. But I think Ben Vellacott was the same. Thought he was coming up to play scrum half for Scotland, and unfortunately, George Horn got a chance to actually play this season, and he's absolutely shone. But yeah, I think you're right though. I think it's a year too early. I think the final where the issue I had was that I actually thought that Munster on the Munster game, Munster defended incredibly well. And again, Toulon did exactly the same thing. Glasgow threw all the toys at them and threw all their plays at them. And they defended very, very well. And I think, you know, it's the same thing with everyone saying that Johnny Matthews should be starting for Scotland and Johnny Matthews this and Johnny Matthews that. Yeah, he's fantastic, a phenomenal player, scoring a lot of tries behind them all. But when the defence, a good team with a good maul defence completely nullified Glasgow's maul. So it's one of those situations where they've come up against a team that have their defence sorted out and have analysed them and actually they've come up against a couple of quality teams. They've had problems, whereas a lot of the teams that they've played, they've taken apart because, let's just be frank, it was the Welsh and it was the Italians. So you're going to hopefully, well, apart from Benetton, you're going to hopefully beat them.
Whoa! I was going to say, including We actually studied them at home.
Yeah.
You've got 3 months to knock this out your system, Anderson.
Nope, I'm keeping it. This is my thing, and I will die on this hill.
You will, incorrectly, repeatedly.
Very quickly.
That will be my legacy.
Very quickly, and only because you'll both complain if I don't. John, your highlight for Glasgow before I move on.
The debut of Sione Vailano, the almost first touch of the ball where he scoops out the ruck, sidesteps a lovely Italian defender who does not want any piece of that, goes 55 metres, scores a try under the posts. Magnificent. What a find he's been this year.
Johnny,
Beating the Stormers New Year week at Scotstoun.
Good
Great
stuff.
atmosphere, great game. Sione Tuipulotu line breaking backwards, and I think that was the moment where Glasgow had momentum building for quite a long time. We're looking good in the Challenge Cup. We're starting to put everything together in the URC, and I think at the end of that game, that was the moment that you were like, "This is actually maybe going to happen this year."
That was the game that brung Hugh Jones back into the Scotland first team.
Yeah.
Everyone went, "Oh wow, he's back!" What
Okay.
a performance!
very quick, as a final roundup of kind of pro rugby before we move on, I'm going to ask you each to choose your Scottish URC player of the season. And here's the challenge: you could choose a Glasgow or an Edinburgh player, and it doesn't matter who you support.
I was going to pick
So
Rory
this is a-
Sutherland as well.
This is a thought experiment. You could put, I mean, it could be a Scottish international. If someone wants to pick Blade Thompson, they can do. He did play some games this season before he's retired. Craig, I'll start with you.
Oh man, can you come back to me in a second? I'll have to have a think of
Okay,
it.
Lisa, have you had a chance to think about who your Scottish URC player of the season would be?
Oh my days, this is like literally putting up pressure on the spot here. I'd probably have to say, oh dear God, pressure.
Want me to go because mine's absolutely
please.
done.
Please
I'm
go
gonna
now.
have to
Quick,
put
quick.
two nails on.
Uh,
All good.
Sione Tuipulotu.
John.
Yeah. So two for me.
No, you're not allowed
Dempsey.
to. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to.
I'm gonna take
I've
two.
said your player, not players.
Jack
choose.
Dempsey, George Horn. Equal.
Which one?
Equal. Both.
It can't
They're
be equal. They're different positions. You've got to choose one.
Equal. They're both beautiful.
Just because you're in a room with a virtual room with two people from How Five, you can drop George Horn if you want to.
Jack
Please
Dempsey.
them.
Jack Dempsey.
Jack Dempsey. Okay, Craig, have you had a chance to think? You're allowed to say George Horn because you
Okay.
because you're
Well,
from
it
How
actually,
Five,
it,
so
it
that's
actually, it
There's
actually
a
was
gimme
George.
for you.
It actually was George Horn because we've been talking about George Horn for the last 3 years about how he wasn't getting game time and how he was such a loss to this game without getting game time, and finally he has a coach that believes in him and gives him game time, and look what happens. So I have to, I'm obviously WP Nell, VP is the man, and I'm incredibly. I love him to death, so he's going to be my Edinburgh Player of the Year. But I think George Horn has done a phenomenal job this year.
Lisa.
I might be for a bit more unseen stuff, but like probably Richie Gray and just the resurgence he's had since coming back. And actually, yeah, I like Richie Gray, to be honest, the unsung hero.
Cammy, who's yours? Because nobody's mentioned Javin Sebastian.
I haven't got one, and I haven't got one, John, because I think that pro rugby in Scotland is nonsense.
You could pick an international of the year if you wanted.
An international of the year. I probably would have said Richie Gray, to be fair, just because I think he's come back. His fitness levels are just phenomenal, given we think when he made his debut and how long he's played and how long he had out as well of the international game and what a difference he's made. Speaking of internationals, let's talk about the women. Let's talk about Scotland women then and do a season review on that. And everyone's looking at the time, all our Patreons are thinking, how are they going to fit in Scotland? And we're not. That's the thing, because Scotland's season's not over yet because there's a World Cup. So we'll review Scotland at the end of the World Cup, because that's where the proof of the pudding and for Scotland men lies, is at the end of a World Cup cycle. So let's talk about Scotland women then. Lisa, it's been a long season because we've had a World Cup and we've had a Six Nations. We've had a big season in that we've had an announcement of pro contracts finally after a long wait. And I suppose looking back on it, you could class it as a success because, I mean, it was at the World Cup. They were, pushed Australia all the way, narrow loss to Wales. Similar in the Six Nations we've talked about, win against Italy and Ireland. A possible, there could have been a win against Wales, which would have been 3. So maybe, missed opportunities, but still overall positive.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positive to take from it. I mean, some of them were maybe enforced in terms of, the depth that we're getting in certain positions. Obviously, without having Emma and Sarah Bonner in, we're seeing more depth come through in the second row, a bit more obviously with Evie Gallagher coming on the scene. I'm really putting her mark down at 8 as well. But I think there's still little things that you're a bit like, this really needs to be changed. Obviously, getting so close is amazing, but when that's all you're ever doing, you're always that, just about. It's like then a case of, well, what is it that we still need to do to get us over the line? Because these games are there, like Wales are there for the taking, 100%. Like 100%, they are there for the taking. There's nothing too fantastical about them. There's nothing they do that's dramatically amazing that we can't counter and do even better ourselves. But it's looking for those catalysts in the team now. It's like who's now going to stand up going forward and say, actually, you know what, I'm sick of being 1 or 2 points away. Like we need to now get, like we said before, I think for all the Six Nations, we need to get a bit more cutthroat and a bit more ruthless. And having those players do that. And yeah, I think, there's definitely lots of little things in there, but it's now just piecing it all together and saying, okay, well, this is what we want to look like. I know obviously team culture's been worked on massively as well, and you can see that, the girls enjoy each other's company. I mean, they kind of have to now that they're spending so much time together. But yeah, I'd like to see a bit more, and I think it'll be interesting to see how we go in tier 2 of WXV against some of the other teams from around the world and stuff. But I'm edgy, but I'm feeling confident. I'm feeling quite confident.
Good, Craig. I think one of the things looking at some of those World Cup games before this podcast and look at the kind of the names in those teams and looking at where we've ended up in the Six Nations. I think one of the positives would be that there have been players who've retired, like you had Hannah Smith, who've been big features of this Scotland team for a while now, and then also there's been the likes, Rona Lloyd's gone and been part of the GB7 squad, and again she's been a huge part of the squad and has scored a lot of tries for Scotland. And the fact that I'm sure within the squad their absence has been felt, but others have stepped up into those roles and perform and as a squad, and from a results perspective, there hasn't been a significant drop. So that's got to be a positive that there is now or appears to be certainly kind of a bit more depth.
Yeah. I think if you look at some of the performers within the Six Nations, they were definitely some of them were the new players coming in, getting more, and I think for me, I think where you're seeing the depth in players is the fact that you're now getting the younger players that are coming through are only really knowing professionalism. So they come into the squad and they've not had to balance a job, a working life, and playing high level rugby for their actual team, and then playing for their country. So all they're used to and are ready to, all they've known is professionalism. They're used to that level. So they're coming in and they're showing that their standards are very, very high. And so I think it's a positive. What also has shown is that there's some players have come along who have been in the squad for some time, and they've just this year they've developed very well. Lana Skeldon's always been fantastic, so you can't really, we can't really say, she's getting better. She is getting better and better, but she's been at a very high standard before. But for example, Helen Nelson her kicking from hand this year has been far better. Her kicking from the tee was very, very good as well. So it's this sort of hope, and I don't know if she's one of the players that's got a full professional contract, but those taking away those other burdens and saying, right, well, you're concentrating on rugby all of your time, you can see the extra 1%, the extra 10% that's coming to these players that have been within the squad for some time. So it's a really exciting time for Scottish rugby. It's a really exciting time for the team, and we just need to ensure that everyone within the team, whether it's backroom staff, whether it's management, whether it's the players, are all pushing forward in the same vein and have the same goals.
Yeah, and Johnny, Lisa touched on the culture in the squad. And it's something we've talked about before, even kind of I say professionalism in inverted commas, because there's, it's not like there's been significant, it's been investment of a sort, but maybe could go further. But pre-professionalism, we've always talked about what appeared to be a really good culture within the women's squad, and some of the stuff on social media and the way they kind of communicated and engaged with fans was superb. I think that's continued through that. I mean, we see, Ellis Martin that we've had on the podcast before, seems to be the official photographer, and that's extended to some of the squad. I think going and running training sessions or even coaching the age grade teams. I think Alice was probably involved in the under-16s at one point. Yeah. I think I saw. And that is fantastic. I would take anything away from that. That is fantastic because, to have that link and that connection between the professionalism and the age grades and the pathways is brilliant. On the other hand, it's hard to know whether or not that's great. And that's, if that's something the players want to do and they're going and doing that, fantastic. But is this just more evidence of kind of women having to kind of go in and do these jobs because nobody else is doing them? And that's what's hard to tell. Do you know what I mean?
That's exactly
there's a lack of resource. So someone is having to step in, and it's someone who's, volunteering from the pro rugby. And actually, we should be investment in having a proper coach at under 16 level, because there would be uproar in the Blazers if you didn't have a proper under 16 coach in the boys.
Yeah, it's about striking a balance between maintaining the atmosphere and the ethos and all the stuff that have made the women's team build and get more and more successful for the last few years, but also making sure that they've got the support that they need now that they're professional to keep that building going. Like, the money that we're spending on contracts is money that's completely wasted without any support. Like, you can't take players that are amateur 6 months ago, start paying them, and then go, oh, you're professional now, so you can win all these games. Why are you not winning these games? It's like, that's not how it works. That's the players being paid and getting the professional contracts is one piece of the puzzle, but the support needs to be there as well. They need to have backroom staff. They need to have coaching. There needs to be pathway coaches to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, you're just setting it up to fail, and then in 5 years you can go, well, we tried investing in the women's team and it didn't work. It's like, no, giving female players a contract to be a professional player is a great start, and it was absolutely essential, and we needed to do it, but they also need to be supported properly. Things like Scotland losing 2 World Cup pool games because of one conversion in each game, when the same day Chris Patterson's standing pitchside for URC TV doing Edinburgh Benetton, when he is theoretically the kicking coach for the Scotland national setup. Like, I'm sorry, but if you're the national setup's kicking coach and one of your national senior teams is in a World Cup, why are you not there? And then we lose 2 pool games by one conversion. So professional contracts is brilliant, and we banged the drum for that for ages, and it was what we needed. But you're setting them up to fail unless you support them properly, and you're wasting your money unless you support them properly.
Bear in mind, day before, Chris Patterson was at a corporate event as well, representing BT. So,
what his job is, God knows, because he just gets rolled out for everything, to be honest. No slight on the man, he's a great kicking coach, and we'd love to have more opportunity to have with him, but he's stretched so thin on the ground that they're like, any sort of event, Mossy will go. Mossy can do this. Mossy can do that.
And it's a shame, because you don't want to make it sound like I'm blaming him or anything, but you've got to think about the priorities, because at the end of the day, you are talking about a senior national representative team in a World Cup, and you've got a national kicking coach. So why is he not there?
He's so stretched. He's so stretched. He records the official podcast from his car, like Marion and Jeff. Like he's sat outside, like a kind of a divorcee sat outside his ex-wife's house. That's what it looks like.
We did have rumours about this, Cam.
Oh, you expect them to say she's poisoned the bairns against me. She's poisoned the bairns against me.
Get Mossy a proper studio. That's obviously like that's obviously that's way down the list of priorities, like funding wise from the SIE. But just get don't make him record from his car. Bless him. Just.
It's almost like he's humble bragging how busy he is.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, Lisa, you're going to agree with that. I mean, it's that there have been there is a step in the right direction, but I think we've said before that it feels in a way too little, too late, unless there is then a significant ramping up, and to a certain extent, there has to be an easing into it, because you can't just suddenly throw a load of money and hope it starts to work. There does have to be a plan behind it. But it has to be an accelerated plan at the same time.
Yeah, it does need to be, because like you say, the other teams we've gone up against have had contracts in place for 5-6 years now, and we've always say we're always playing catch up, but we've got the resources there already on site in terms of what the boys use. How can we use that ourselves? And like Donny said, we need the support there. It's not just support of when we're on the pitch and stuff. It's actually off the pitch is probably more pertinent and more important. Like, you're bringing in these contracts, which are just year contracts. It's not like the boys who have, 2 to 4 years of security. These are just yearly contracts. Now it's a case of, have you got support and plans in place for when these girls suddenly don't have a contract? What are you going to do? Is it a case of, you've not got a contract, cheer by, go and sort yourself out? Or, we need to have stuff in there where you support and you help these girls get back into education, get back into work, get back into earning a living. Because from personal experience, I literally had a phone call that lasted 5 minutes being like, oh, just to let you know, you don't have a contract for next year. Any questions? No. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Done. Finished. Gone. Like, that's the hardest part. And I don't think people often realize it, is then it's like, well, what do you do next? And that's where the sport needs to be as well, especially. It's great to have like backroom staff, people taking care of nutrition. I mean, you saw a photo of the backroom staff they had from the Six Nations. I think there must have been about 20 of them there, which is great and amazing. But is everything in place in those right areas? And I mean, it's not even the women's game, it's the men's game as well. It's like, it's that life after rugby. That's the most important and key part. And that's where I think we need to really start stepping up both sides of the game and actually help these guys further down the line. But yeah, I think having these contracts is a great initial thing. It's like, well, now what's going to flourish and blossom from there in terms of what are our needs and necessities, and how can we make this investment grow year on year and not just be, like you say, just a flash and pan of, here, we've tried it, didn't work. Well, we at least gave it a shot. Oh, well.
And that was there was a rumour, kind of wrapping up now, because I'm conscious we're stepping into Patreon time now, and I want to kind of wrap up and take the discussion into there. But there was a suggestion, I think, a year ago, and it may have been on Twitter. I'm going to say it was on Twitter just in case I'm in trouble and someone messaged me this privately. But I think the URC had an away day, and top of their list was women's URC. That was what that's the marketing guys. This isn't kind of the Blazers. This is the marketing guys said that's top priority would be a women's URC, because we think we could market the hell out of that and we can make it a success. And there's been noises that were heading that way, but then there's also been a lot of silence recently. And I think that's the big risk now, is where does it go from here? Because we can't be in a situation where you've got what they call like the emerging teams almost. These kind of, anybody that's not playing in the English Prems gets put in a team, and we have some runouts against the Welsh and the Welsh and Irish provinces, and that's it. There has to be something more concrete now, and it's either you create a UK wide one. It doesn't have to replicate the URC, I suppose, but it has to be something more regular and solid.
Yeah, I think to be fair to the URC, they do seem to be considering and thinking about options for really boosting their product, and I think that ultimately comes down to maybe some of the shareholders they've got. There's a desire to make sure they've got a marketable product, and they do seem quite forward thinking in that aspect. Now there has been a lot of silence on that, and I do wonder what's at the root of that. I do wonder if the emerging, the emerging nations sort of Celtic thing that we've kind of went down the route of is maybe a stepping stone, and maybe it's a bit of a trial thing. There would definitely be a market for the women's URC. Now, the Italian women are all playing at a decent level. Wales are now moving to professionalism. Scotland are moving to professionalism. Let's not necessarily worry too much about getting South Africa in there just now, because it's already a bit of a carbon footprint nightmare to go and visit South Africa. But there's definitely potential to create a really strong league, and actually it would drag. I think in some ways, like, the biggest disappointment of the women's game at this point in time is Ireland and where Ireland are at, and I think it's the one that frustrates everyone. Having been a really strong player in women's rugby at one point, they are so far behind the curve now, and I think almost that sort of competition would drag Irish rugby to really push themselves forward and try and compete. And I think that would be incredibly important for the overall development of the game. Do I think that benefits Scottish rugby? Absolutely not. Because Ireland will throw money at it and we will probably find ourselves behind them. But for the overall benefit of the sport, I think it's really important. So I think we've had a bit of silence, but I think we're not far off probably some noise. But if we take the World XV as an example, we're probably not going to hear anything about it until it actually happens. So let's just assume stuff's happening in the background, and they'll pop up with a URC Women's League, and they'll just announce it 3 days before it starts.
Look, the partnership with Rock Nation's got to be doing something, because Beyonce's just played Murrayfield and the Principality. If there's any evidence that the Irish influence on world rugby is waning, it's that Beyonce did not play the Aviva.
I heard she was very good. She was very, very good, but she changed clothes a lot.
It's cold.
Someone said that to me as well, actually. Yeah.
That was the feedback I had.
I do that regularly at Murrayfield.
That's just cool. I was going to say, Craig, it's
You
cold.
did it last time we were there, actually, Craig.
Yeah, because I remember. I got there and realised I was woefully unprepared for how cold it was, so I had to go in there.
He bought the Edinburgh training kit with a city map on it and chucked it on while we were like halfway through the game.
Was that the 4 pints per half day?
I think it might be that.
Yes.
It was. It was. Yeah.
It was plenty. It was more than 4 pints, that's for sure.
Anyway, look, we're going to leave it there for we'll carry on with this chat in the Patreon podcast. Look, that's it for this season. Everybody, keep an eye on our social media channels, and we'll announce when we're going to start putting out full podcasts again for the general public. For patrons, hang on if you're watching live, or check your inbox if you're not. We'll have a Patreon only episode this week, and then we'll kick back in with some Patreon only episodes in the run up to the World Cup and start recording the full ones, probably just in advance of some of the summer tests. For the moment, though, it is goodbye from me and goodbye from Lisa, John, Johnny, and Craig.
Bye.
Hey, Droops.
Bye.